Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd, fa'auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Sadaqallahul azim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So now moving on to ayah number 95, Surah Baqarah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولن يتمنوه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Sadaqallahul Azim, but they will never wish for it ever because of what their hands have put forth, and Allah is knowing of the wrongdoers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah, which is a direct continuation of the previous ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the previous ayah challenged the Bani Israeel, who said that Jannah is just for them. They are the chosen people, so it's just for them. They have the exclusive right to it, and everybody else, no matter how good they are, they're not going into Jannah. They're just going to have whatever they're going to have here, and that's it. There's nothing for them in the akhirah, no matter how much they even suffer in this world out of doing good. This is just exclusively for us. So when they put such a strong statement of exclusivity to it, and not just that it's just for them, that meaning that they, when they die, they just go straight to Jannah. So then what applies to us also applies to them. This dunya is a place of difficulty. This dunya is a place of hardship. This dunya is a place of testing and trial and loss and sacrifice and commitment and hurt and injury. So in that case, where Jannah is pure pleasure, why stay here? And if the means to go there is through death, why not wish for death? Basic logic. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds with that to them in the previous ayah. If this is the case, then why don't you wish for death? And then I discussed some of that in the last session. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides the reason for them not wishing for death, not asking for this for death. And that is in this ayah, that they will never wish for death ever because of what their hands have put forth. And Allah is knowing of the wrongdoers. So let's just look at that, inshallah, what that is in a little bit more detail. So Allah Ta'ala declares that the Bani Israel would never wish for death despite claiming Jannah as exclusive to them because of what their hands had put before them. Now, when it talks about what your hands have put before you, it basically means in terms of your deeds, your actions in this world, what you have done in this life, how you have lived this life. And as a result of that, you don't want to die. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies that. You people, the Bani Israel, you don't want to die. You say that Jannah is yours, exclusive to you. However, you don't want to die. So there's something wrong in this claim. There's something wrong within yourselves. And what is it that their hands are put forward? Well, the people were generally of two sorts in that time, and even thereafter for that matter. Those that were refuting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the time of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in the time of Musa alaihi wasallam, refuting Musa alayhi salam, and of course the Torah in that time, and the Quran in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these were the rabbis and the leaders. These people, they did not want to accept the Nabuwah, the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he's not a Bani Israel, and they also didn't want to accept it because there was some pride they had in the Torah, in that book, and saying that this is our book and we are blessed by it. So if another book comes, immediately it's going to be in competition with their book, and then if it says that it supersedes it, that it corrects it, that it's a overseer to it, it's the foregone, the criteria for what is right, what is not, and therefore the Torah has to be measured against it. This then was a big dent in their pride. Had they really kind of been in touch with their ta'alluq with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it wouldn't have mattered. They wouldn't have seen it like that at all. They would have understood that the Quran is from Allah, the Torah is from Allah, and if Allah has updated his message, this is fine. It would be just the same as what people today are happy to have a newer version, an updated version of a computer or a phone or whatever, gladly, happily. That's how it would have been for them, principally speaking. But there were underlying reasons as to why they felt this offense with the Torah. One, because they felt the Torah was theirs, and again had become that put that exclusivity on it. And so any new book that came, despite being from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they felt an offense because this was their book and they had for so many years carried it and for so many years promoted it and preached it. Secondly, they had made some changes in the Torah. The original Torah was the 10 commandments. That's it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave commandments, and that was it, 10 of them by which the Bani Israel were to live by. But they added things to that, and there was also changes to the extent that the word from the Torah, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, could be reinterpreted and allow certain people to be excused from those rulings to some extent. And they had lived that life for a long time. And of course, they were aware of that, specifically the rabbis, the people who had actually made these changes in themselves. And again, this not include all the people of Bani Israel, in the same sense, it does not include all the rabbis, all the leaders as well. It is all those who are convicted of this, who are guilty of this, that would be that this ayah would apply to. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows those people, and those people know themselves. So in that respect, these rabbis and leaders were troubled, and so it was easy for them to promote negativity about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, negativity about the Quran, refutations about both, and therefore have the people, the masses, generally follow, because the masses generally had allegiance to the rabbis in the respect of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their allegiance to the rabbis, allegiance to the Torah that they knew, the Torah that was presented to them, meant to them allegiance to Allah. So it's easy to manipulate that allegiance and make it against Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, make it against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that people would act in that manner without realizing that they were actually acting against the very thing that they're supposed to have loyalty towards, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his chosen prophets and his kalam. The second type of people were those who had lived a life of neglect, luxury, and sin, and they were unwilling to let go of that. This is something they were unwilling to let go of. And this is, again, human nature. We love comfort. We love luxury. We want to have things, own things, be possessors of things, have comfort in life, have pleasure, have good food, good companionship, etc. So all of this, they had taken beyond the limits. And by doing so, of course, you forget the life of the akhirah and you become indulged in the life of dunya. So when you are indulged in the life of dunya, your nafs grows stronger over you, and then you don't want to let go. So this is another aspect of those people. This was the second type of people that was there. The first were the rabbis and leaders who were doing refutations based upon, as I mentioned, they're holding on to the changes they had made and claiming that to be from Allah Ta'ala, of the Torah and so on. And the second type were people who simply, they were rich, they had expensive lifestyles, lavish lifestyles, and they didn't want to let go. Their nafs had overcome them. So these were the types of people that were there, and generally. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares that they will never want to because of what their hands have put forward, these are the two main sources of what their hands had put forward. Refutations of Allah and His kalam, and a life of luxury, which obviously meant indulgence in sin because they went beyond the bounds. So neither of those aspects did the Bani Israel as a whole. Obviously, there were good individuals amongst them. As a whole, they did not want to let go of. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points this out. You will never wish for death because of what your hands have put forward. So in both cases, they were actually fearful of death due to the inevitable meeting with Allah Ta'ala, meaning they would have to account for this. Those who had made changes in the Torah, they knew they had made those changes. They knew that they had given alleviations to certain people, considerations to other people who had paid them money. And so the punishment was lifted because of what they reinterpreted, which they themselves knew was not correct. And of course, meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would bring that up. And they didn't want that. So they wouldn't want for death. Nevertheless, they preached Jannah is ours, but this was an uncertainty to the point that when death was brought up, that uncertainty becomes a huge cloud over their heads. In respect of the luxurious living, well, the sin that's involved, they were well aware, and they knew that Allah would be angry with them. They knew that they may get some punishment, but as a result of that, they would not want death. They would not want it mentioned. They would not want to obviously undergo death, because undergoing death means the meeting with Allah Ta'ala. Death itself was just a gateway, a step. What it meant was taking you out of your life in this dunya and presenting you in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and confronting you with what you've done wrong and with the neglect through the life of luxury that you've lived in this world. And they didn't want that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strikes the heart of the matter by pointing this out, that you will never want death because of what your hands have put before you. Now I'd like to have a look at what this means for us as an ummah, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولن يتمنوه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. صدق الله العظيم. But they will never wish for it ever because of what their hands have put forth, and Allah is knowing of the wrongdoers. Many Muslims live lives of neglect, luxury and sin, and do not want to let go either. Just as the Bani Israeel, just as Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam warned us and cautioned us that you will follow the ways of the Yahud and Nasara step by step. We have done that. Many of us are guilty of this. Many more of us are guilty of it than not. Those of us who live lives of piety and righteousness are few and far between, and those of us that live the lives of luxury are many, especially when we come to Western lands and live amongst them. They who are full of luxury, they who have taken from the poor and made them more destitute and become rich themselves, because a majority of European lands, European countries have been colonial masters to other countries, especially in the African continent, and they have ripped from them their resources and made themselves rich because of their love of luxury, their love of ease and comfort. So they made their lives of ease and comfort and luxury, and tragically we've come to their lands because of that luxury, and we've forgotten for many cases of ourselves that the life that we lived was a better life because it kept us in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So coming here, growing up in a life of luxury, we have become neglectful, and of course we have indulged in sin. There are many sins that are included in the sins of alcohol, of sexual license, of drugs, of fame, fortune, etc., lies and deceit, subhanallah. Now, it's all there. There's no need for me to list them all. We are aware of what we do in our lives, whether it's individuals and whether it is as a community or as a whole. And this is all largely due to the pull of the dunya, the luxury which we found in the West, and decided to stay here and become used to it. So as a result of that, yes, so many of us, we don't want to die. We don't even want to talk about death. And when death is brought up, people want to change the subject, because it, again, the same for us as it was for the Bani Israel, it makes us confront the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So though many Muslims may justify using Islam, they know their internal truths, and so they fear death. So justifying it is by saying, well, the Sahaba, there are many amongst them who were rich. There were many amongst them who had a lot of money. Yes, there were people like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, Uthman radiallahu anhu. Yes, there were, but we cannot compare to them in their piety. When we talk about these people, it's often actually difficult for most of us to talk about the Sahaba, because their mentality, their approach, their connection with Allah, their actual state of Iman was such, is something we can only dream of or never really connect with. Despite having all the wealth that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu did, he did not have love for it. There was no love in his heart. How do we know this? Well, one of the biggest examples of his not being attached to his wealth was where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam once asked for some donations, some charity that he can raise funds to for the Muslims. And at that instance, the famous story about how Umar radiallahu anhu came with half of everything he had. And this goes for him too, that he literally went through his house and almost like taking a saw and cutting his home in half, his house in half. It was practically like that, that he took half of everything. And that is really difficult to do. You actually, it's very difficult to do, not because of, how to actually cut or split a bag of rice into or something like that, or a bag of flour into two. No, I don't mean that. What I mean is that the actual nafs that we sometimes want to just put a little bit more for ourselves than we give to somebody else, even when we do make that intention. And then to do it with every single item in your house, that's difficult. It's impossible for us to think, how would somebody do that? But Umar radiallahu anhu did exactly that and brought half of everything he had out to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then along comes Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, and he has brought everything right down to the clothes on their back and just had what he was walking in. That was it. To the extent that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked, Ya Abu Bakr, what have you left behind for your family? He said, I have left Allah and His Rasul. So everything came from his home, right down to cups and plates and spoons. Everything came from his home that he had. Not that he had much to begin with, but everything that he had and whatever of his expenses and riches that he had, all the wealth, brought it all and put it before Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hence he said, I have left only Allah and His Rasul. Every penny, dirham, dinar was brought forward. Now, who would do that? Anyone who's not even rich, anybody who's just normal standard living, and if he was to give in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, could not do this today. So when we talk about Sahaba and say, well, they were rich and so it's okay to be rich. No, it's not okay to be rich for us. It was okay to be rich for them because they did not connect with that richness. They did not connect with that life of luxury. They did not connect with the glitter of the gold. And they truly had gold. We don't. We have digits. We have bank accounts with digits where we're told we have this much in the account. We never actually see how, even paper money and so on is being removed now. Banks are closing down and paper money is being removed. So you actually just, most of us use credit cards and so on in any case. So this is the finances we have. It's not even real. But look how we hold on to it. And how would we actually give? Because when we give, when charity comes along, somebody asks for you to give generously, we give a fraction, a drop in the ocean to what we actually have and own. So we, with this kind of mentality, cannot talk about them with their kind of mentality. Not at all. No. So this trying to justify it's okay to be rich in Islam. No. First, you become in Islam. You become in Islam. That is that you purify yourself from the love of wealth. And then we can talk about being rich. Then you can go out and earn money because you can give it so easily away. But if you can't do that, and the more you have, the more you want, and the more it causes sickness in our hearts, then we can't talk about Sahaba and justify that they were rich and we can be rich. No, we can't do that. And even if we were to go down that road about them being rich and we being rich, they gave when it came to the cause of Allah until they had nothing left. We will never do that. We will never do that. So even if we were to accept that it's okay to be rich and accept that argument, those who are rich gave that away. We who are rich would never give it away. We only make it grow. And we are concerned if there's any slack in that. So that's our internal truth. We know our internal truth. And so we fear death because death means the loss of all that. We no longer have it. It's no longer in our possession. Somebody else is going to get it. We don't want that. So that is another evidence that we are not like the Sahaba, because the Sahaba had no concern for what they did or did not have and what they did or did not leave behind and who did or did not take it. They had no concern for that. For us, this is almost impossible to contemplate. Many of the leaders and learned are also fearful of having manipulated their followers. That's also the case, just as it was with Bani Israeel, so it is with us today. Many of our leaders, our politicians, our community leaders, our imams in some cases, our Islamic leaders and rulers in Islamic organizations and companies, many of them have things that they are quite ashamed of or unwilling to allow to become public. And therefore, because of what they've done, because of how funds have been misappropriated in masjids by committee leaders or by imams or by presidents and rulers in countries for their people, how things have been, money has been lost, money has been siphoned away into their own pockets, so to speak, or money has been borrowed from the International Monetary Fund, from the World Bank, which has then caused financial deficit in the country, which is then being taken from the people in order to pay it back, and therefore cause poverty. All these things based upon the decisions of the leaders and the rulers and so on. Those people know what they've done. And as a result of that, they fear death, because facing Allah Ta'ala for those decisions which cause so much hardship to so many is going to be very difficult. And the same thing with leaders and scholars, rulers, imams and scholars who have said things, who have manipulated things, who have tried to make things easy or excused countries or oppressors or zalims. Then for them, they know what they have done. For them, they know that when there was time to call out on the member of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the khutbah of Jummah, or at any other time, to call out to the people, the Muslim community and the Muslim ummah, to fight for what was right, to fight for for justice, to fight for the oppressed, regardless of who the oppressed were. Because don't forget, in any Muslim country, there are plenty of non-Muslims. But when the people are oppressed, all of them are oppressed. And it's just upon the heads of the rulers and leaders, and it's upon the heads of the imams and the scholars to speak out against that oppression without any compromise, so that the scholars teach the people what should be done, and the rulers, they will order it to be done. And between the two, this can be made into a change for the country. But those things don't happen in Muslim countries. And Muslim countries suffer. And as a result of that, those people, those leaders, those scholars, those imams will face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, they don't want to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is what their hands have put forward. So that's our state. The very thought of death causes a person to realize their otherwise hidden internal truths. And that's what it's all about, really. We don't want to face death because we know our own internal truth, whether it's as a community, whether it's as a group, whether it's as an organization, whether it's as a committee, whether it's as an individual. We know our internal truths. And if so long as our internal truths are not truths, so long as our internal truths are on the outside deception and hidden on the inside, then we will fear death. We will fear death, because death, as it was for Bani Israel, is for us the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He will put before us what our hands have done, what our hands have sent forward. So that's those people. As for righteous people, inshallah, righteous people live by the truth. So they do not fear death. They yearn for the rewards of what they have lived by, because they knew the life was about living by the truth. They knew the truth, they understood the truth, and they lived by it. They did not hide it, they did not manipulate it, they did not try to change it. They lived by that truth. And as a result of that, their salah, their du'as, their hajj, whatever they did was genuine. Not just that, but how they lived their life, how they dealt with people, how they supported one another, how they hurt and grieved over those who were oppressed and would want the oppressors to change their ways. All of this and much more besides. They knew that this was their life, and this was the life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had advised us to live through the Quran. And having lived that life, they yearned for the rewards of that life from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And death was the gateway to those rewards, and they would be happy and they would not fear death. So I'm looking at the hadith again from the last session, because I want to say a few more things about this. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أحب لقاء الله أحب الله لقاءه ومن كره لقاء الله كره الله لقاءه فقلت يا نبي الله أكراهية الموت فكنا نكره الموت فقال ليس كذلك ولكن المؤمن إذا بشر برحمة الله ورضوانه وجنته أحب لقاء الله وأحب الله لقاءه وإن الكافر إذا بشر بعذاب الله وسخطه كره لقاء الله وكره الله لقاءه. صدق الرسول. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever loves to meet Allah, Allah loves to meet him. Whoever hates to meet Allah, Allah hates to meet him. I said, Ya Rasulullah, O Prophet of Allah, all of us hate death and are averse to it. So this is one of the Sahaba. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, it is not like this. Rather, when a believer is given glad tidings of the mercy of Allah, His pleasure and Jannah, His paradise, he loves to meet Allah and Allah loves to meet him. But when a disbeliever is given news of punishment by the hand of Allah and the hardship imposed by him, he hates to meet Allah and Allah hates to meet him. So this hadith teaches us many lessons, as I said previously, and I'm going to just look at one or two more. A disbeliever realizes that he or she has only gathered lies and harm to others in their life. They have lived that kind of a life. They have lied to people, they have deceived people, and they've harmed people through those lies and through their actions. And that's the way they chose to live. It's not forced upon them. They have chose to live that life, because at the same time, if good people can live by the truth, bad people can live by the truth and become good people. One can change into the other. So what's the difference? There's no force. It is simply choice. And sometimes, yes, it takes a little bit of courage, because if you're surrounded by people of deceit and lies, then, well, firstly, the Deen teaches us, get out of that situation. Be with people of truth. Be with people of truth. Either you try to change those people, and if you're not in a position where you don't have the resources, you don't have the strength, you don't have the ability to be able to make a change, then you come away from those people, because if you don't, you'll become like them. They will envelope you. So that's one thing you can do. You have a choice there. Then it's easy for you to make the choice of being righteous, because you'll be with righteous people. This is how it can be done. It's not difficult, but the difficulty we impose upon ourselves because of the waswasa of shaitan. And when he whispers to you that don't do this, don't do that, you'll lose this and you'll lose that. And as a result of that, we stay where we are, and then we become polluted with the corruption of those around us, and we ourselves become corrupt. And so lies and deceit and harm to others is the life we live, and then we join them. Those who are liars and deceivers and harmers of others, we join them in the punishment. So when we go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he or she who has lived such a life will now face the consequences of that life. And that means hating to die, because you know you're going to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the life you've lived. So this is one of the lessons that we learn from this particular hadith. Whereas a believer has lived truthfully in a world of deceit and harm, driven by the love for Allah Ta'ala and wants to see His pleasure. So the believer is he or she, that they've understood how to live life. They've understood what is right and what is righteousness. So they live life like that. They have no love for dunya. They have no love for wealth and luxury. They have no love for wanting comforts when other people are in discomfort. They understand that they have sympathy and heart. So as a result of that, they are also in this dunya in the midst of deceit and harm, because this dunya in the current state it's in is full of deceit and harm. The evils in this dunya far outweigh the good. That's why there is so much harm and destruction in the world today. There is so much deceit. There is so much lies. There is so much dishonesty that we are being told this is happening or that is happening, and we are given the overt truth, but that is not the truth. The actual truth is inner truth. The outer truth is what the media tells us, what the media is given to tell us, and that is to manipulate us into believing that it's a situation in the world, that there is a pandemic, or there is a global warming, or there is some kind of threat of one thing or another, of war, or any such thing like this is entirely from their narrative. So a believer has to live in that world of deception, that world of hate, that world of deceit, that world of harm, where there is so much oppression and zulm, and that's where we are. However, the believer tries still, despite all of this, despite being surrounded, almost drowned in this deceit, he or she, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has given them the truth, and they try to see the truth of what is happening, and they try to live a life of truth. And they still continue to come away from the dunya, though the dunya is being pushed into their faces as it is into the faces of everybody else. Most people take that on board and become connected to the dunya, start to have love for the dunya, but the believer doesn't. He or she still struggles, and they struggle to find other people like them, because, of course, human beings, we are social beings. We need to have companionship. So we find others who are like us, and we try to live together and stay together, because we can encourage one another and protect one another. But throughout all of this, and despite all of this, believers live a life which is difficult. And because it's difficult, the thing that gives them hope and keeps them going and gives them strength is their inner love for Allah Ta'ala. And they are driven by this love for Allah Ta'ala. And because of their love for Allah Ta'ala, it drives them to continue that live that life of righteousness and honesty. And as a result of that, they know and expect and look forward to meeting with Allah Ta'ala, because the reward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them from all the difficulty they've done and all the goodness that they have sent ahead. What their hands have done, is the goodness now, what they've sent ahead. And that's why the statement is open from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah, because of what their hands have sent forward. Because of what their hands have sent forward. So what their hands have sent forward can also be good. Can also be good. And a person may wish for death because of what his or her hands have sent forward, because it's good. Whereas a person may hate for death because of what his or her hands have sent forward is evil. So this same statement for us, this ayah, can mean for believers, for good people, for righteous people, it can mean the opposite, that person would actually want to have death because they will meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And such is their state that it's like a person who buys a gift for somebody they love, and then they go and give that gift to them. But they wait, they stay there, they wait, they ask them, okay, open it. And they want to see the face of that person light up and the glow in their eyes and the appreciation and the gratitude that they bestow upon the giver. And the giver wants to, for him or her, that moment is important. They want to know that what they've done for the one they love was appreciated, it was worth it. So the believer thinks of death in that sense. He or she is driven to death, wants to go beyond death, meet Allah, because they want to see, was Allah, did we make it? Did we do enough? Was all that we did in our lives, which we suffered for, was it worth all that effort? Is Allah pleased? Let us see Allah pleased. We want to hear Him, we want to see Him say it to us, and that is the pleasure of the believer, inshallah. Spiritually, to reflect upon this, what we do in life contributes to how we feel about death and the meeting with Allah Ta'ala. So the big choice and the big decision is that, how do we want to live life? And we have all the means. The Quran gives us how to live our life. The Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his lifestyle and the lifestyle of the Sahaba, because he imposed that upon them and they took that on board and lived like that. How did they live? And as I said, one of the biggest and most important issues is this, the lack of love they had for dunya. Their hearts were not attached to dunya. Their hearts were attached to Allah Ta'ala. And if you consider that heart as in terms of a container, there's only so much a container will have. And if that container has only got so much space, then the love for Allah, which is the most prior thing, should take up all the space. But if there's love for dunya, then an amount of space will be taken up in the heart for love of dunya, which will remove exactly that amount of space for the love of Allah, i.e. the amount of love, the space for love taken up by the dunya, you will not have for Allah Ta'ala. You'll only have it in the space that left. So let's just say half the heart is full of love for dunya, only half is left for the love of Allah. And if we consider this, the heart was created to contain love for Allah. That's what it was created for. Many of the ulama, the shuyukh speak about this, many of the awliya speak about this and practice this. The heart was created just to have the love for Allah. So if there's any other love in the heart, that is seen as a contamination. That is seen as an impurity, in the same way as if you had a drink of milk or water or whatever, and there was a drop or two of urine in it. Just a drop or two, which is a very small part of the whole glass of water or juice or whatever it was that you want to drink. And then what will you do? You will throw the whole thing away. Just because of that one drop, you will throw it away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us for love for Him exclusively, solely. And if there is love for Him exclusively and solely, the whole heart will be full with love for Allah Ta'ala. There will not be love for anything else. And that is what we need to reflect upon. And if we have that in our hearts, then subhanAllah, there will be no love for dunya, there will be no attachment to dunya, there will be no temptation from Iblis that can ever move us, because our heart is thoroughly in love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wanting to please Him. So everything we do will be, is Allah going to be pleased with this? Is Allah going to be pleased with this? Is Allah going to be pleased with this? We will do everything in life for Allah's sake. We will befriend people for Allah's sake. We will marry people for Allah's sake. We will have children for Allah's sake. We will raise them for Allah's sake. We will pray for Allah's sake. We will fast for Allah's sake. We will do for Allah's sake. We will not do for Allah's sake. And then a life like that, yes, indeed, we will be happy with death. We will welcome death when Allah decrees it. Not to be suicidal, but simply when Allah decrees, we will be happy that He has now called us, because we want to go forward to the one we have loved, and we want to see all the gifts we have sent to Him. We want Him to open those gifts, and we want to see that He was pleased with those gifts, that our efforts in this dunya have been worthwhile. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to understand and benefit from this, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.